Yeah, and I think the use of them, and the more that we do, and I think the powers that we've got. I think there was an issue about trade and standards data and sharing with the police. There's an issue that we're trying to get to grips with there. And I think we are looking at the vapes. I think from public health point of view, they're saying, well, where's the evidence that the vapes are dangerous? Because we don't want us to deter people from vapes and into smoking, particularly young people. So the evidence is starting to mount, and I think we are, you know, through the Combating Drugs Partnership, I raise it nationally again at the Addictions and Substance Misuse, and we are pulling all that evidence out and then sharing it with partners. So I think we've got obviously about the regulation in the vape shops. Absolutely, we need to do more of that, but also the education of, from a parent's point, where you're buying these vapes from as well. Yeah, we looked at dangerous driving. I think that's something that we could come back on, because you know that we did Operation Park Safe. There's been some schools in Darlington about where they're parking dangerously. So I think we can bring something back next time, sweetie, to update.
Park Safe.
Yeah, Park Safe in Darlington, but it seems to have gone quite well. It's not been rolled out across the force area in every school, because obviously it's been managed around where the demand, where the concerns are. So if you have got anything, you know, feed it in, report it, because it does seem to be doing the right work with local residents, the schools, the children, and also the parents driving people to school. Who, what it does, if you haven't heard of it, it actually, each school who's part of Park Safe has their own QR code. So anybody in the area uses a QR code for a particular school. So that footage is linked to the school. So residents, drivers, parents will capture somebody who parking on double yellow lines, or parking where a pram might have to go into the main road to get round it. And that footage is uploaded, a bit like Operation Snap. It goes to the police. The police then take action against the drivers of those vehicles that are parking dangerously. And it's gone down really well so far. It's gone down really well, both with the school, with the children, and the residents. Obviously, the drivers that are affected, we do with that education beforehand, particularly the parents, so we know that this is coming. But unlike where you get your PCSOs there for a week, everybody complies, then they go away, and then they go back to the bad behaviours and bad parking and dangerous driving, dangerous parking. This is a constant thing that's there. So it's in the affected schools. It's got a particular issue with dangerous parking. But do let me know, feed it in, and we can raise it with the roads policing team. So I think it goes on reports of dangerous parking. Obviously, you come from yourselves or from the head teachers. Okay. Move on. We've talked about the hotspot policing. The support that we've had from police cadets has been really, really good and very, very valuable. The cadets are aged between 11 and 17. And as you know, a bit like the mini police, they're managed by Durham Aged Against Crime, and they provide an extra uniform presence in the hotspot areas. And they've also been visiting businesses and encouraging them to report ASB and how to report ASB, and if they're not satisfied, how they can complain. These leaflets are going down very well in the community, the sort of cards that go through the doors with the various signposts and options, so they get the right agency for the right issue. And if they're suffering, we don't want them to suffer in silence. I think that's the basic message. So they've been a really welcome addition to the project, and something for me, it links to what I said earlier about young people being a key role in helping keep our communities safe, and it does link to our Commissioner's Challenge and the rollout of young people involved in crime prevention as well. So a great credit to them. Any questions on that? No? Can just, sweetie, if you can just pick up on the chat if there's anything, so we can bring in the chat as well. If I move on. Anti-slavery, we've funded an anti-slavery training project to develop some high quality resources for services to improve awareness of modern slavery, exploitation and trafficking. The project is being led by the Durham Modern Slavery and Human Trafficking Network, which is set up in 2022, which brings multiple agencies together to share information, improve intelligence gathering, ensure that country and the force area is better equipped to respond to victims. So that's really, really important. We're doing it locally, and then we could share that information nationally. The resources is going to include an animated video, a resource booklet, anti-slavery, and around the anti-slavery champion model. And the aim is to create quality products to remove the gaps in current provision and improve confidence among professionals in responding to victims of modern slavery, exploitation and trafficking. And I think that's a key area for us, because sometimes it's hidden, but it's something I know that this government's very, very keen to pick up on. And the more we're aware, the more that we report, the more intelligence and information we have, the better it'll be. So nothing, I can't say anything on that. But if you don't ask, if something comes to you after, please just drop me an email and we will definitely pick it up and respond as well. You'll be aware as well. I think it's not a stranger to you, unlike from Durham. But Graham Hall, who was your previous Darlington's previous head of community safety, has started work this week as my new Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner. Those of you that know Graham well, he's a retired Chief Superintendent, and as your previous head of community safety, I think he knows many of you very, very well. I know, and also many of you will have worked with him previously, and I'm sure you'll agree he's a great asset to my team, and I think a real opportunity to ensure all that knowledge of Darlington, the residents, the areas, the teams, will be really invaluable to me and my team, because that's coming from you to me, and I think that'll be a real asset to us all. I think we've got some real challenges ahead. I think as members, that with finances, we've got a new government, and there's a lot of funds. As a commissioner, I fund a lot of projects, a lot of victim services, youth services. We've got Safer Streets, we've got various different funded projects, but everything's, even the Darlington, we part of, Darlington Council, that everything's paused at the moment until it goes through the Treasury and a spending review to see what the horizon looks like next year. We're pushing for longer than one term, a bit more 3 year at least, if we're going to get funded. It's a bit more consistent, a bit more reassurance for those. But we're also looking at the current funded projects, and people who were funded until March may start looking for alternative work, might be looking elsewhere. We're really keen to wherever possible to give that reassurance in a short space of time as we wait for a definitive thing coming from the council, because we know how long it takes to recruit, we know how long it takes to vet, and we know how long it takes for somebody to give a notice in. So if we've got a current project, what we are doing some risk assessment to say, if we don't get information soon, what can we potentially fund to give some reassurance to some of those agencies that are delivering on our behalf, and also for yourself in your area. So I think we will keep you posted on that. It's very, very important. But if you hear anything, from your area, feed it into us as well, so we're aware at the risks, just in case we aren't aware. Just don't assume we do, but feed it in. And then you'll be aware. We talked about the criminal justice, and this is before all of this happened, with the recent events. Early resettlement. So part of we are looking at the early release and relevant support for the resettlement of prisoners into the community. Obviously, we know that the prison estate's really struggling in relation to capacity. So the government's confirmation is that more prisoners will be subject to early release to ease the prison overcrowding. And these prisoners, there is cases, which I've sort of given an example myself just recently, where they're being released without housing, and there's a real urgent need for practical support to tackle that revolving door. A lot of prisoners are actually wanting to go back to prison because the alternative is homelessness on the streets without any funding at all. And this was just in that women's prison example, is that's how we want to keep people out of prison. We don't want them to revolving door to get the safety and security of being in an establishment. I think there's people who are in prison who shouldn't be there. There's people who should be in there that aren't. So we have to get that balance right. So we will continue to make representations to ensure that the whole system approach is taken, rather than just focusing on the prison population. It puts a lot of demand on our officers. It puts a lot of demand on our police officers as well, a lot of demand on probation and all the agencies that are coping. So I think in Durham's area, I think it's manageable, but there's that, there's that churn. If less people are going, if potentially policy changes and there's less people on deferred sentences or something like checkpoint, that's we've proven that works really well. That means there's more people in the community that need to be managed. So we are making representations, as I mentioned, for resources to like new burdens that we may have to pick up. And I think that it's just, anybody want to come in on that? No? Okay. Oh, Beth, like to come in?
Hi, yeah, just kind of my question further up about diversionary activities and positive, shall we say, community service sort of sentences to try and, but also like proactive. And when I was younger, the police used to fund summer activities to keep kids off the streets, sort of thing, so they're not bored. And I mean, I'm aware that funding is very tight, as you've just said, but things like that to try and prevent people getting into trouble with the police in the first place, but also where they have got into trouble with the police at low level, volunteering, community service kind of sentences, if you like, so that people can help. I mentioned it specifically around the recent riots. Can we get them something positive? Obviously not where they can negatively affect the communities. That it have to be done very carefully, but to actively try and break down those barriers with those communities that they're vilifying, and go, no, we're all just the same people trying to get on in life, and they've probably got just as much deprivation as you. So we need far more kind of community work to try and prevent people having to go into prison in the first place.
Yeah, and I think if you look at, thankfully, in a way, we haven't got violence reduction, as in the VRUs, such as Violence Reduction Unit. We haven't got like Project Ada, which they get a significant grant to look at violent crime and drug-related crime. But most of those areas that have got that money is invested in diversionary activities for young people, to give them positive, affordable, accessible activities, but also good role models as well. Some people, they don't have the role models, and that coaching and mentoring is really, really important. So if you see that, a lot of their funding goes into the youth aspect. What they're saying to me now, Byron, is when you review things, it's a bit more less people, but more focused on that cohort of people who are more likely to offend, more likely to carry a knife, more likely to be involved and exploited. So rather than it's a bit like how we used to, rather than the universal, which everybody gets it and it goes everywhere, they're looking at targeting into those really hard to reach, hard to engage. So the numbers are less and it's harder, but I think that's where the thinking, that focus needs to be. But we can, as Durham, we can look at preventing violent crime before it happens, before it becomes what you've seen in our neighbouring areas like Northumbria and Cleveland. We can learn the lessons from them and do something different, but use the knowledge that they've got around young people. And it's something that I know I've talked to Amanda regularly about that work that is coming, the support from my team to Darlington for young people's activities. And I think going forward, it's looking at I think there's some work going on around youth provision generally, and then what does that look like? So if we are going to fund something, I mean, I've just recently funded, I think there's the Martin Gray Academy to do some work that was in Darlington, which is really, really good, but to bring some of that into Durham as well, some of the good stuff that was working on that. So as a police and crime commissioner, I think that's where the young aspect comes in, but it's picking all that rich picture of all the things that is going on, and then identifying the gaps and putting the support in there. But sometimes things are going on, but nobody knows about them. They're not, somebody has to take somebody through that door, and they don't get there. And I think that hand holding and signposting is really, really important. So I think, as you will see, as part of the new plan, the young persons aspect, we'll be funding around the ESB in particular, but it will impact upon all those other crimes as well. One of the things I want to do, and I think it links to a previous when I was talking about drug driving. If you think about drugs and organised crime and drug dealing, it depends on demand. If you're more likely to be stopped on the road, you're less likely to possibly take your cocaine on a Friday, Saturday, which may reduce your demand, because these organised crime gangs are feeding somebody's weekly habit, same as from a cannabis. So what we're trying to do, there's not much information about drugs and how long they stay in your system, and obviously I'll be looking to the likes of Amanda, Public Health, to try and get something communicated around the information, because people could be stopped and not realizing that cannabis stays in the system a lot longer than you would expect it to be. But I want to get it from a public health point of view, rather than we've picked something up from an APCC to say cannabis can stay in your system depending on, I suppose, how much, the strength, etc., a fortnight. So anybody really who smokes cannabis shouldn't be driving. That's like a message that you could potentially get out there. Cocaine stays in a lot longer than obviously alcohol, and again, depend on the strength and the frequency, etc. So somehow, between locally, nationally, we need to get that message out. But the BMA said you can reduce the alcohol limit, but you need enforcement. So that resourcing and policing is really important. So for young people, when the 17-year-old, they're starting to drive, we need to get that education out. We know how the stopping distance and things, so we need to do the education ideally in a new revised, the multiple choice questions about drunks as well, so they know what's happening in their system. Because I think you've got a choice of cocaine or a car. I think, given where we live, I think most people would choose the car than a Friday night from a Friday, Saturday night from a cocaine. So there's a lot more. It's a lot more complex than that, and I probably am oversimplifying it, but just shows that work it's not widely known, but it's something that we can do and get that message out, and hopefully that will increase the work that we do in the communities on our roads. So roads policing is a really important thing for me to tackle. I will just very quickly, pleased to report that our Victims Care and Advice Service has officially been recognised as a national leader in effective victim care, and they've got a Victims Quality mark, which recognises exceptionally high standards of the victim care work that we are doing, and they described the extent of the specialist expertise available within the team as remarkable, and they also said they would encourage other areas to look to Durham as an example of best practice and an illustration of what's possible within a victim service. as you know, we as a PCC are funded a roads victims we talked about Zachary and the family, but our support and the victims care worker works at the roads policing to provide that support to victims of road deaths and killed and seriously injured. And we also provide support for antisocial behaviour victims as well. And I was really pleased that we brought that service because it was so important to the public. I brought it in-house, so it's part of the PCC's office, Victim Care and Community Peer Mentors. Would you like to come in, Bryony? Do you want to add on that?
Yeah, thank you. It was just, you've kind of veered back to, I missed my chance when you were talking about roads before. It was around the petition that you mentioned, which I strongly support, but it's also just, I mean, we see so many examples of poor driving, and I don't know whether with the Operation Snap, whether when driving is really poor, the police have the legal powers to, remove someone's license, for example, because it is, and make them retake the test. Obviously not a lifetime ban for that, but just to be far more robust and say when we see really examples of really poor driving, that people need to retake their test, because you need to pick people up before they kill. And obviously if after they've killed, it's a bit late, but trying to prevent it and go, no, this is really, really bad, you must retake your test, because you're clearly not taking it seriously enough, and if you need it for your job, then you should have thought about that before driving really poorly. And also, and the second part was around the policing around parking, and I agree with Anne-Marie Curry's comment about the speeding and dual carriageways where, there's it's 30 in all of Darlington except in the areas where it's 20 and signposted. So the misinformation, and people think they know something and it's actually not correct. So it's like we need a bit of a public information campaign. But corner shops are particularly bad with parking, people parking where they shouldn't, people parking on the pavement, takeaways, and particularly a bugbear of mine is Duke Street. They've just put in a lovely new cycle path, which is always parked on,
Can I what I'll do, I'll give it to Sweetie, but there was, I picked up ParkSafe at a problem solving conference last year, and there was a police, I think he was a police constable from Yorkshire that's very helpfully done the highway code. I've just seen some, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know that, and he's got a picture of this is illegal, this is a highway code, and this is a contravention, and this is something that he hands out as part of his wider ParkSafe. But like you say, parking, I think it was, I can't remember, it was from the distance from the junctions, the parking on the the pavement, and they had a picture of a pram had to go on the road, so that the person who's reporting it showed she was like, obviously the camera showed that. One of the things that I think we need to do, and again, I'm the part of that road safety national lead. We had an operation a couple of weeks ago, and it's where they have the cameras on the motorway, but they actually pick up anybody on a mobile phone and anybody not on a seatbelt. And I think I'm also trying to make the case that we've processed all these contraventions and like you say, dangerous driving because they haven't got a seatbelt and they're using a mobile phone. And I think it's up to I think there's over £120,000 worth of fines. We don't get them, which I think we should, and it's gone to the government, and that's in a week's work. And what you found is the amount of people who aren't wearing a seatbelt, the amount of people who have got no excuse to use a mobile phone because the car system would be able to do it. The worst case example was a car, and the very, very, very clear pictures. It was a mother sitting in the front of the car, passenger side, no seatbelt, and she had her toddler on a knee, unrestrained. and the toddler had his hands outside the car and the window was down. And so on that scenario, they aren't just looking at dangerous driving. There's an issue there with child neglect, because that child was in a very, very, very vulnerable situation if there was an accident or if you had to stop sharply, etc. So that technology is there, and we just think, well, that's in one day you could get 100 people who are using the mobile phone. So again, collectively, that's how we can make our roads safer with a bit more technology. But that education, absolutely right, because what we want to do for Operation Snap is get all those drivers who've been caught and fined and penalised as a result, because that gets the message out. At the moment, we could get better at that. We process in people, but the information that comes out the other side, I think we need to pick up on as well. But it's roads police and road safety is going to be a big one going forward. So I've gone slightly over, but we there any time that you want to contact me, you can. I just want on the last bit of good news. We've also welcomed 8 PCSOs to the roles as well. We've got new officers. We were giving them the warrant card, I think, last week. So that replenishment of our neighbourhood teams is continuing. We are, between myself and the chief, very, very committed to the neighbourhood policing model, and hopefully with the additional forces that opportunities are coming, we'll get more of those numbers in the near future. So I'll stop there. If anybody wants to ask a question before we close the meeting, please do so. But we'll take the messages, and thank you very much for contributing in the chat box. Anything, what's happening in your communities, given the tensions, or anything that we can do, happy to do walkabouts, happy to go and speak to businesses with yourselves. Just give us a shout and we'll make arrangements. Okay, well that brings me to an end. Thank you, everybody. I say hope to see you. Hope to see you soon. Take care.